probably about 1981, more or less, probably more. And James and Joel had come to Los Angeles for the weekend. There was something James had to do. And we invited them to stay at the Radical Ferry Sanctuary, where we all lived together, where Harry Hay, John Burnside, and Michael Fleming and I lived together. And there was something where James was very helpful to me that day, very helpful. And I'm eternally grateful for his help with this. Harry Hay and I played a central role in creating and founding and getting started the Radical Fairy movement, which has developed into an international movement of gay spirituality and consciousness. Harry, for the 70s, I first made contact with Harry in 1969 at a Gay Liberation Front meeting, and then he and John moved to New Mexico. But we kept in contact. Whenever Harry would come to Los Angeles, we always carved out a big chunk of time together to talk about gay liberation and what was happening. Whenever I would get into that part of the country, I always made sure I got a day or two at San Juan Pueblo to hang out with Harry and John, but it was primarily Harry that I went to visit. And was responsible for bringing Harry and John back to Los Angeles. They left in 1968 and came back in the spring of 1979. Because I'd been out there in 1978, and I was shocked by the poverty that I saw that they were living in. Somebody of his historical importance and living, and finally through manipulation, any other skill I could use, they agreed to come back to Los Angeles, and we lived together in a commune. And it was the beginning of a renaissance in Harry's life, with documentary films being made about him, a biography being written, his Radical Fairy work, etc. So from 1969 to 1982, we lived together for 3 years at the Radical Fairy Sanctuary. Soon after the first Radical Fairy gathering, I began to see that the Radical Fairies were coming like, an alter ego to Harry. It was his identity in a way that was what felt to me like it was cutting off some unwritten agreement that we had made, that this was about exploring gay consciousness, exploring dimensions of being gay that maybe hadn't been explored before. And so I was getting a little frustrated in terms of how things were going. And while I was helpful and supportive and what have you internally, it felt like it was going somewhere where I just didn't want to go. Not because it wasn't interesting, but because it wasn't soulful enough. It wasn't deep enough. It was too much peanut butter and jelly and not enough caviar for me. And I was struggling with this. And James and Joel came to visit for a weekend. And you know what? Things were very busy and charming, what have you. And I got up early on a Sunday morning so I could go out and sit on the porch, which I love to do, and read the Sunday newspaper and just have some quiet time. And I'm out in the porch, maybe there's a 6:30 in the morning. And I'm out there for about 15 minutes. And who should come out on the porch but James? And he says, I was hoping I would find you alone. I wanted to get some time with you. I'm worried about you. And I said, you're worried about me? Why are you worried? He said, I don't know, there's something about this visit that I'm picking up an internal heaviness. There's something about that spirit of yours isn't dancing the way it usually dances. And I just wanted to see if there was anything going on that maybe could be helpful. And so I started to unload to James about what was going on, the struggles I was having, et cetera, et cetera. And he listened very carefully, as he always did with me. And at one point he said, you know, it really boils down to how many gurus can dance on the head of a needle. And when I heard that, I thought, oh yeah, that's exactly it. It's that two people with very strong personalities who have very strong ideas about things, experiences around things, came together to create something. But it doesn't necessarily mean they'll always be moving in the same direction. And then James started talking to me about the turning point in his life. with marriage and divorce, et cetera, where he says at some point you just have to leave a relationship that is comfortable, that becomes something that it wasn't in the beginning, and move out in your own direction. And the more he talked, the more I could see that he was talking to my soul. He was talking to my heart. And it was not too long after that conversation where I explained to Harry that I felt like I needed some time to really go into the ocean and go as deep as I could go. And the radical fairy work and other organizing I was doing in the gay community was keeping me from going in that direction. And soon, while I kept one foot in community organizing, the other foot went into the ocean. And I spent around 13 years in depthful, very creative Jungian psychotherapy. Began to listen to my dreams and then start talking to my dreams, and began formally studying shamanism with one of the best shamanic teachers in the world. And it took me in a direction that I needed to go. And it was James saying to me, how many gurus can dance on the head of a needle? That was the turning point in that. It was that conversation with James. And he didn't say more than maybe 200 words that morning. But the 200 words that he said to me was what I needed to hear at that time. And it was coming from somebody that I admired and trusted, and that I knew had walked his own path, that I could believe in the words that he was saying to me. And so it was one of the turning points in my life. It isn't that I left my work in the gay community, because I always continued doing it during the 13 years, but I deepened it in a way that I couldn't deepen if I had stayed connected the way I was connected then to the radical fairies. This is not a criticism of Harry. This is not a criticism of the radical fairies. It's a statement about how that spiritual path unfolded for me. And I'm as involved with the radical fairies today as I was ever. We're now planning a 30th anniversary Western Regional Radical Fairy Gathering in California in October, and so the work continues. But there was a point when I had to have the courage to say, there's something else I need to be doing. My soul is calling me in another direction. Even though I didn't know exactly those words, I couldn't articulate it the way I'm articulating it now. But I had the feeling inside that that's what I needed to do. And James was central to that. I see him working at the edge of the village like an old shaman. He knows what herbs, what ingredients this person is needing in terms of these work with them. I don't know whether that was conscious or unconscious. It really doesn't matter. He did the work, and he reached me, and there are many gay men who tell me stories like this. Donald Ham, who passed away about 10 years ago, often talked about his first poetry reading that he had with James, where there was this rush of love that came over him, and it was the turning point in him coming out. Donald Ham was a film director, writer, did a lot of programs for public television. And it was hearing James at a poetry reading and experienced James, which was the turning point for him. And I think he affected many people that way. What is the significance of the combination of sex and spirit? Well, first of all, there's never been a disconnect from sex and spirit. It's our heads many times, and those religious traditions of which we come from many times, that make those artificial distinctions. It's like separating body, mind, and spirit. Huh? How do you do that? You can't do that. Those are just devices we use for talking. Unfortunately, some people take it a little more seriously than others. So the idea that spirituality and sex are separate is something that comes into Western culture, largely with Christianity. Judaism isn't quite that fragmented spiritually when it comes to sex, body, and spirit. Many times, Jewish people are referred to as people of the body. They are very embodied in the world in a way that many times Christians and Muslims are not. But you find it largely, the division is largely with Christianity, well, though sometimes in Judaism. One of the places where James reminds me of Allen Ginsberg, or reminds me of Walt Whitman, is his refusal to go along with that line of thinking. His refusal to see spirit as something that he does on Sundays, and the body is, or sex is something that he does Monday through Saturday, metaphorically speaking. That there is a profound union. There's no way you can divide them. That the way we manifest our love, our caring, one of the ways is through sex. Sometimes, with me, it's just been pure lust. At 3 a.m. in some dark alley in Los Angeles. Unfortunately, that doesn't happen as often these days as they did when I was in my late 20s, early 30s. But there was some place where that experience brought out the wildness in me, where my soul needed those experiences, those wild experiences. And they took the form of sexual experiences, but much more than sex was going on there. Many times with the young gay men that I work with these days, there's, especially since 1980-81 with the HIV precautions, there's someplace where I see that they have not been able to access the wildness of themselves as gay men, that animal lust as gay men. And I think that there's some place in us that needs those kinds of experiences. Every day, I hope not. But like the Dionysian rituals, ceremonies of ancient Greece, there would be 2 major Dionysian ceremonies. There would be 2 minor ones, 4 a year. And during that time, you could walk down dark alleys at 3 a.m. And it was seen as part of one's spiritual work. We have lost that understanding in Western culture. And I think gay liberation is helping to bring that back, along with feminism and other things. Reading much of the writings of, let's say, feminists during the 70s, early 80s, there was that reconnection of spirit and body. I'm thinking primarily of Susan Griffith, for example, in her writing. That there's some place where they were never separated. They're never separated in us, and that's why those struggles take place, because these artificial divisions are made, which naturally don't happen. And so James was really ecstatically open about that one finds one way, one helps to connect those separate parts of oneself through that understanding of spirit and sex are not separate. I can remember with the early work that I did in the gay community in Los Angeles, where I would talk about gay spirituality. And you could see in gay men's eyes, you could see something not computing in their brains. The idea that you would use gay and spirituality in one breath simply didn't make sense to them, because they were never seen as a unity, as being together. And James lubricated, and I use that word carefully, James lubricated that opening for us in a way that I don't think anybody other than Ginsberg and Whitman did to such a large scale. That there is no division between body, spirit, sex. There is no division. Those are artificial. They're like lines drawn on a map. It's like imperialists dividing Africa. I'll take it, and that's what happened. That our bodies became colonized in ways. And one country had one part, and another country had another part, and we really felt that in our lives. It doesn't have to be that way. It doesn't have to be that way. And James articulated that as well as anybody I know today. You know, with each generation, it's hard to predict what's going to speak to them. My generation, Allen Ginsberg, the first time I heard how, I lived on a farm in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania. I rushed off to Franklin and Marshall College to find that book. I was sure that a college library had it, and after a little interrogation by the librarian, I was able to read a copy. But it was someplace into my generation where that poem spoke, where certain works speak to one generation that doesn't speak to another generation. What's important, I think, is the communication between those generations, because there's a profound interdependency between generations, between youth, adults, elders, and ancestors. And there's the danger of becoming, living in a world where there's age apartheid. And that age apartheid robs us of something. It robs, if I didn't have contact with young people, there's music that I wouldn't be exposed to. There's poetry I wouldn't be exposed to. There are words I wouldn't be exposed to. There are, and there's a limit to this, YouTube videos I wouldn't be exposed to. By the same token, they might not be exposed to James Broughton. Or they might not be exposed to Carl Jung. Or they might not be exposed to Harry Hay. Or things that I think they need for their survival packet on this planet. And so there's a profound interdependency, knowing that there's some things that young people will know, and there's some things that old people will know, which are not about sharing with other generations, because you can hardly share them. But there are things that are essential to our survival that depends on that interdependency and that sharing across generations. And I think James's poetry is one of those. James's way of seeing the world. Because there are young people out there who need to know that, who need to know that there are other people who see the world as they see it. There's some place where we need to be blessed in a certain way. And it's not what happens on Sunday mornings in the church, where everybody is blessed. It's someplace where our soul needs to be seen. I think James's poetry does that. Does it do it for everybody? No, I doubt it. Does it do it for some people? Yes, those who need to have it. There was an old understanding that it was the young person who always selected the elder, not the other way around. Because the young person had a sense of what they needed. A young person had a sense of where they were going. And so they could see in the village or the tribe the person that best manifested that. And then they would go hang around that person traditionally. Many times you'd have to buy a gift and give it to the elder. And if they accepted your gift, it meant, I'm taking you on as a project in the way somebody once took me on as a project. And that only happens across age lines. It doesn't happen, it can't happen if there's age apartheid. And our society and our communities are robbed, are impoverished by not having that cross-generational dialogue, that cross-generational support. And it's both ways. I am robbed, I am impoverished by not having the ideas and the spirit of adults and youth in my life. Do not ask where we go from here. Nobody knows. Some think they do, but nobody really knows anything about anything. We are only gurgles in the stream, and the stream doesn't know where it is going either. It is just going. It is just going with its nature as far as that will take it. And with its nature, it has to take along a horde of gurgles who are forever asking where they are gurgling to. Everything is going beautifully nowhere. I mean, it's so profound. It's like a Zen moment. It's like the young monk in the monastery who came to the Roshi who was dying and said, before you die, you must tell me wisdom. And the old Roshi opened one eye and kind of tiredly looked at the young man and said, when you're hungry, eat. When you're tired, sleep. And this poem kind of has that quality to it, that simplicity of where are we going? It's the journey that's important, as is often said, not the destination. And once you get that understanding, it becomes a little easier. This is it. This is it. And I am it. And you are it. And so is that. And he is it. And she is it. And it is it. And that is that. Oh, it is this. And it is thus. And it is them. And it is us. and it is now, and here it is, and here we are. So this is it. That's all, folks. James Broughton is a light in our culture that is growing dimmer and dimmer and dimmer every day. And James brings a light into that culture that is profound, is whimsical, is fun, is a result of deep sea diving by him. And it's something that we need to nourish our souls, keep us awake, and continue dancing in the moonlight. James Broughton is the devil. 666. James Broughton is here to corrupt you. James Broughton. Big Mama. Big Daddy. Big Joy.